So, yes, we are in First Samuel chapter 8. And we got through a little bit of it last week. And so we had kind of talked about um, Samuel's children, his sons. They would basically succeed him because, it says Samuel was old. And so he had appointed his son as judges over Israel. But just like with Eli, his kids weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing, and they were corrupt. And so the people was seeing this. And so at this point, just going through, losing the ark, and then, Samuel's leadership, and then now he's appointing his sons, and they were no good. So, I guess it just come to the point to say, you know what, we want a king. We want to be like the other nations. And so now they're asking Samuel to appoint a king. They don't want any more judges because, but man is fallible. So whether it be, a priest, a judge, a king, we still have the potential for sinning, and for being corrupt, for misleading the people, so all of that. So, and it seems that's from the beginning when God promised Abraham, he was going to make a great nation. And so he took him and Sarah, and through Isaac, the Israel people were born. But they always turned away from God, so they always looked to man. God never failed them. Every promise that he made, he kept, or he is keeping. But they didn't or wouldn't acknowledge that. And so they wanted a physical person that they could see, feel, and touch. And so their seemingly invisible God, who had never lost a battle, who had always brought them out, even when they turned from him, when they came back to him, he still cared for them. But they didn't see that. And if we look at, just our own personal walk, people are always going to let you down, whether it be your mother, father, spouse, children, sister, brother, whatever, your job, whomever, your pastor, she is going to let you down in some way, shape, form, or another. Because if we are going to let people down, so it's not just, we're depending on other people. We sometimes let people down too. We promise things that we can't deliver on, or we may have good intentions, but for whatever reasons, or we just fall short. Amen. And so we need to constantly look to our Lord and Savior, because he is the only one who's going to carry us through in good times, hard times, bad times, sad times, and he may send people, and he often does send people into our lives to encourage us or to help us along the way. But still, that source is God. It's not that individual person. And so we are people, as a nation, history, society, whatever, we haven't quite learned that really, and not talking about just secular society. I'm talking about believers, people who profess to be saved. We have a hard time really, truly depending and trusting on God 100%. Now, we say that we do, and we go through the motions, and we can put up a good front, but when that term, when the rubber meets the road, and you're faced with some thing in your life, whatever that may be, we always don't put God or trust God the way that we should. And so we see this is just another phase in Israel's history where instead of leading and depending upon God, they are now requesting a king. Yeah.
Again.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So, and so God, when Samuel goes to the Lord and he's praying about it, he's hurt. He's kind of upset with them, because they should be trusting him. And then God reassures him. He confirms him and says, they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting me. So I am their true king. So, but God tells him, you know what, Samuel? Give the people what they ask for. And so that's where we are now. So starting with verse number 10, 1 Samuel 8, 10. So Samuel spoke all the words of the Lord to the people who had asked of him a king. He said, "This will be the procedure of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and place them for himself in his chariots and among his horsemen, and they will run before his chariots." So Samuel was relating to them what God was telling them. And even I kind of brought the verse up last week. It was in Deuteronomy 17, verses 14 through 20. And it was what God had instructed Moses, because he said that he had prophesied to Moses. Well, I guess God don't prophesy. He just tells it that it's not a prophecy. He's just saying what is going to happen. But he even told Moses back in Deuteronomy that there is going to come a time when the people are going to request a king. And this is what a king is going to do for you. And it wasn't like good thing. I mean, all good things. And so they were already warned that they shouldn't have a king, that God was Israel's king. And so now Samuel is saying, all the things are going to happen to them with the king. And if we look at it, and we can kind of relate this to present day, as we go through it, but your loyalties have to be to that entity. And so our king right now, in this day and age, is the government, right? Because the government has the rule over us. So if you think about it, when the people were under God, they were required to give a tenth to the priest, and that's how God set it up. And it was to take care of them. But he's going to tell them, when this king comes in, you're going to have to pay him taxes. You're going to have to give up your sons to go to war, your land, a part of the things that, your produce, your livestock. So, and today it's the same thing. You may think you're free to do and hire what you want, but we have the same constraints now. We have to pay, everything is taxed. Your car's taxed, your home is taxed, your income is taxed, everything you buy is taxed, and that's all the government. They can come in and take your property or land, through laws and whatever. So, we are beholden to them. And if you think about social programs, whether it be, welfare, Medi-Cal, or whatever social program, you are enslaving yourself to them in order to be able to have these benefits, but you're not really free, So,
and we had that discussion. I think, remember once I was saying that if we tithe the way we pay the taxes, the government wouldn't have control over us, the church would, and the church being God.
Yeah.
And so for those of us that govern our lives as to tithing and waiting on God, you can see the blessing in that. You really can.
Yeah.
And people think, you got $300, how you live there, or how you drive that, but when you're with Christ, he makes those kind of things to be.
Yeah.
But I see, like you said today, I see that, but it's so funny because Or I want to know the percentage of who really follows God with tithing and who really follows the world. I think most people follow, like you said, the government paying all those taxes.
Yeah.
Well, I think to your question about the percentage, I don't think we would truly know that percentage. But I was having this discussion on a related topic with a pastor friend of mine yesterday. God lets us know if we truly read the word, if we're falling short.
Yes.
And we were kind of discussing like envy and jealousy. Envy and jealousy is something that's personal. That is something that will be triggered inside of you that no one on the outside will know that you are envious of someone or if you're jealous of someone. And the truth can be said to your point about tithing. You know, you can be like, was it Ananias and Sapphira, having people convinced you're giving what you're declaring that you're going to give, but only God truly knows if you are sowing and investing into the kingdom at the level you're supposed to. But, you know, he's not a man that he should lie. You know, those of us that do give and sow can attest to that he moves to the benefit of his people.
And even with, jealousy and envy, they can manifest outwardly. Because even though that could be like a secret thing within yourself, but if it goes too long, because people have killed people out of yes, in jealousy. So it's not just something that you can't see. If you get too caught up in that, it will manifest itself outwardly. Yeah. Okay, so verse 12. He will appoint for himself commanders of thousands and of fifties, and some to do his plowing, and to reap his harvest, and to make his weapons of war, and equipment for his chariots. So this is all the things. So not only, because you figure there are the agrarian society, they had plowed fields and grew crops and all that kind of stuff. But somebody has to maintain the king, right? So just like the government, when they take our taxes to cover, Sacramento or Washington, D.C., that's to maintain the livelihood of the government. So he's saying, so not only are you going to have to plow your own fields, you're going to have to plow his field. You're going to have to build his weapons of war. You're going to have to build his chariots. And I was reading something, and it was saying, like that they took the chariots into battle. So you had one person who was actually driving it, with the horse and everything. But then there were men inside and on the side who were doing the fighting. So you could potentially, you're in war and battle. You can lose your life fighting the king's war. And just like today, there's conflict all over. But then if the United States sends their soldiers to this area, or that area to protect, our interests or the interests of those individuals, you're sending your people to war who could potentially die for some cause that you either may or may not agree with. But that's what a king will bring. Let's see. He will also take your daughters for perfumers and cooks and bakers. So the king's palace has to go on, right? So your young people, your daughters, your wives are going to be there slaving and cooking and keeping their house, serving them, And so it's not just about you and your family anymore. It's about maintaining the kingdom. It says he will take the best of your fields and your vineyards and your olive groves and give them to his servants. And so that's what the government does today. It's, sad to say, sometimes the
eminent domain.
Yeah, or just even the interest you see like scandals and stuff where they have misappropriated funds or using government jets to go to their kids' soccer games. And, so all of these benefits come with it. And then the lowly man who's working hard every day is not seeing any benefit, as much as other people, and their best interest isn't for them. It says he will take 1/10 of your seed and of your vineyards and give it to his officers and to his servants. So if they already have to give 1/10 to God, and then the government is requesting 1/10, so they're having to live on less. He will also take your male servants and your female servants and your best young men and your donkeys and use them for his work. He will take 1/10 of your flocks, and you and yourselves will become his servants. So whereas you had your own field and you were able to take care of your flocks and grow your fields and maintain for your family, so you are potentially losing that and then becoming enslaved to them. So, I mean, he's telling them all of this stuff, and you would think, okay, where's the benefit? God never requested all of this from them.
Just 10%.
Yes, and really, and that was still just to maintain the priest.
Exactly.
So it wasn't, he called for sacrifices when they would, offer sacrifice to him and pray to him, but it wasn't an arduous thing, a hard thing for them to do, and God always blessed them. And when they were obedient, they were blessed behind it. So if the king is coming in and, taking 1/10 of their, wares and their produce and whatever, what are they getting in return? Let's see. He will take 1/10 of your flocks and of yourselves, and you will become his servants. Then you will cry out in that day because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves, but the Lord will not answer you in that day. So the Lord is telling them, okay, you want a king, you choose this king, and when it gets to be hard and you realize this is not a good thing, and you're going to call out to me, you're going to be praying to me, and I'm going to say, don't have an answer for you. Go talk to your king, right? Because that's what you want.
It's interesting because even if you take that to today, people get excited. They go to the ballot box. They choose a governor, a president, a councilman, or whatever it is they select, and then give them a year and a half, and they're already complaining about the situation that has developed, but they had a part in that.
And again, people will disappoint in your expectations. You think because you vote for, whomever, and your person gets into office, but you're just one person out of hundreds of thousands. So your every need and expectation is not going to be met, by this person, being in office. So it's sort of like, you're kind of fooling yourself, misleading yourself. And nevertheless, the people refused to listen to the voice of Samuel, and they said, no, but there shall be a king over us. So Samuel told them everything that God had told them and what could happen. And they said, you know what? No, Samuel, we still want a king. We want someone to be over us. That
it can't happen.
yeah, but when it's coming from the boy, and they did have confidence in Samuel. If Samuel was younger, they probably wouldn't be having this conversation. But because Samuel was old and his sons weren't worthy to be the leaders, now they're saying, we want this. But I guess they forgot how Samuel was in direct communication with God, and now he kind of led them, back to God, as they strayed. But, they don't remember that. So verse 20, so that we also may be like all the other nations. So there you go. That is the reason. God established them and set them apart. And they always wanted to be like everybody else. And you think about it, if God sets you apart, he's saying you're special. I'm holding you in higher esteem. I love you. This is what I'm going to do for you. So God is saying, I can, come with me. I can, elevate you. Not so much, how we think materially so, and, all of that. Yeah, that's not what he's saying. But he's, giving you abundant life. And he's saying, come with me. But then you see all the people over there, and you think, from our vantage point, they're living the high life and they have this and they have it all. And everybody's hunky-dory over there. And you're saying, no, I don't want to go with you. I want to go over there and just, yes, and be like everybody else. And see, it's like, there, as Solomon said, there is nothing new under the sun.
It's interesting where you're looking at that. We would prefer to be a carbon copy of something as opposed to something that's original. That's essentially what they're saying. We want to look, sound, and feel like everyone else. And I recall the early 2000s, the late 90s, where you had all these boy bands, NSYNC, Backstreet Boys, 98 Degrees. If you really didn't know them that well, you probably wouldn't be able to distinguish who sung what.
That's the way people by nature are just followers. There's very few real leaders, and even the people who we think are leaders are following someone else themselves. And so that's our problem. We are truly like sheep. I was watching this movie, and I don't really know if sheep are really like this, but they say they're one of the dumbest animals. Yeah. And so this dog, he was supposed to be a sheepdog, but he wasn't really a good sheepdog. And he literally ran all the sheep. They just ran off the cliff and fell down, into, this big old drop. And you would think, okay, 1 sheep, 2 sheep, 3 sheep. But then you figured as the other sheep, they was like, no, we just seen all our friends. And the thing about it is the dog, as he was herding the sheep or whatever, he stops. But the sheep just keep running over the cliff. And the man lost all his herd because all the sheep was down at the end of the cliff, all dead. And they just followed everyone,
Which is what we do today.
Yeah.
That's why the Bible says, but mine, they know my voice. Mine, they know when I say something to stop. But if you're not in Christ, you're just following the leader, who's usually the devil.
And take you right over the cliff. Take you right over. And you won't, and you go over happy. You go over happy and smiling.
Not knowing you're going to death. Right?
That's right. So it's like they wanted to be like everyone else, all of the nations, that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. Now listen to what they're saying, that our king may judge us. But who judges them now? Isn't God their judge? Hasn't he laid out, this is what I require of you for your obedience to me. And if you're not, this is what's going to happen. So he was the ultimate judge. But did they take to heart his judgment? And then it says, and go out before us and fight our battles. Every time that they had to go out, who went out before them? God. When they prayed, when Joshua took over after Moses had died, and God led him through the battles because they had to go fight all the these different nations for the land that God had promised. But weren't they always victorious? Didn't God lead and direct Joshua to say this is how you were going to do? And then sometimes they didn't even have to fight. He would send like hailstorms, real big hailstorms, and knock all the other armies out. So God went out, and then they wouldn't have to lose any of their warriors, right? Because God was going before them. So everything that they were asking for, they had in their God. But again, they didn't see it. They wanted to be like everyone else. So verse 21, now after Samuel had heard all the words of the people, he repeated, oh, I'm sorry. I'm like, no, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, okay. And now after Samuel had heard all the words of the people, he repeated them in the Lord's hearing. So Samuel goes out, he tells them, this is what the king's going to do. The people still say no. So Samuel goes back to the Lord in prayer and talks to God. Now, none of the people went to God and said, God, should we ask for a king? They were just going on in self. And so Samuel goes back to God and he's praying. And the Lord said to Samuel, listen to their voice and appoint them a king. So Samuel said to the men of Israel, go every man to his city. So he tried, but it was a losing battle. And I kind of wrote down some things, serving God versus, man in government. So God cares and he hears the people. When we go before him in prayer, he will give us an answer. He will lead and guide us and direct us. But government operates only in the interest of itself. So God is for the people, government is for itself. And so, when God promised Abraham that he was going to make a great nation, when they went into Israel, there was 70 people. That was the 12 sons and all of the descendants at the time. It was 70. And in 400 years, when they left out of Egypt, there was over 600,000. And that wasn't counting, that was only the men over a certain age. I think it was age 20. But the younger people, the wives, weren't even counted. So 600,000 people God had grown them to. And the government, he's not for family, so it's not.
It's interesting because where you're saying it, you saw that with Pharaoh calling for the death of the male sons, really. You also see it in the New Testament with drawing a blank on the name. Was it Herod? Those that were 2 years and younger, he wanted them killed. So yeah, you're really speaking the truth. No matter if it was the Egyptian government, the Roman government, even the religious leaders, we see a lot of people protecting their own interests to keep control and power.
And that's what yeah. And that's what he was trying to tell them, that the king was going to be about his power. Yeah, and not for the people. So that's where they find themselves. So God says, and you know what? When God has laid out a plan for us and we reject that plan, eventually he's just going to turn us over to ourselves and say, if this is what you want,
You work it out.
then you go ahead and do it. But thankfully, with our new covenant in Jesus, even if we mess up and turn away from God, he is still always there and faithful to us, that we can go and ask for forgiveness. So starting with chapter 9, Says, now there was a man of Benjamin whose name was Kish, the son of Abiel, the son of Zeror, the son of Bechorath, the son of Pihat, the son of a Benjamite, a mighty man of valor. So we see this in the Bible a lot where, when they introduce a new character or a person of importance or prominence, they always give their genealogy, their history to tell you, where they came from and, who they were related to. And so they're talking about, the tribe of Benjamin, the Benjamite. And so this is where, the king is going to come from. And so Kish had a son, and his son was named Saul, a choice and handsome man, and there was not a more handsome person than he among the sons of Israel. From his shoulders and up, he was taller than any of the people. So, the Bible says God looks at the heart. But look at they're describing him. He was the most handsome man. He stood head and shoulders over everybody else. He was tall. So he was tall and good looking, and he looked the part. And he played the part for some time, but where was his heart?
And it's interesting you say that, because nothing has changed today. There's been research that has shown attractive people are more likely to be hired for positions as opposed to those that people may dub unattractive. And I guess that shallow nature of the human condition is still prevalent today.
And so, we look at this, and who did, when who was the son? Jacob. When Jacob blessed his children, when he blessed Judah, he prophesied at the time that, in Genesis, when Adam and Eve fell, he had told them that there was going to be someone coming that was going to crush the head of the serpent. So we know that as Jesus. And then when Jacob was blessing his children, when he blessed Judah, he said that, he prophesied that the king was going to come through the line of Judah. So we see Saul is a Benjamite. So we know that he is not God's choice, right? Because he is not in the line that, God promised that the king would come from. So
what do you think that says about we know that it's written now, but during that time, I'm assuming they should have been aware of these prophecies, but they elected not to follow what was written. What do you think that says about them?
Well, that they looked at the man on the outside, and they picked someone, again, who looked the part and not necessarily may have had the necessary insight and skills, to be the king. But even, God allowed it. And, as we will go on and continue reading, God kind of set up, but I don't want to say manipulated because that sounds wrong, but he had indicated to Samuel
that Saul would be king.
That's all, yeah. And so he was kind of going along with the people, and he presented something that they would find favorable. But we see, Saul could have been a good king, but he had a heart condition. His heart was not toward God. So even though he was the first king, he could have ended his reign positively. But because of his heart problem and his sin nature, and just as you said at the beginning when we talked about envy and jealousy, what was Saul's downfall? He was envious and jealous of David, because he could have just been a good king and just mentored David, and then when he, died, David could, he had his own son Jonathan, but Saul's, the successor from his side was wiped out because of his jealousy. So it's not always a secret sin. Again, he spent how many years? David spent how many years running from Saul, and Saul trying to kill him? Yeah, a lot. It was a lot of years, because you figure he was young when he first grabbed Saul's attention, and then by the time Saul died, and even God, knowing that he had even told Samuel, I mean, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves, or Saul, that when he was disobedient, he's like, I'm stripping this kingdom from you. Samuel had even told him. So at that point, it was really, nothing he can do, because God already told him, nope, you're not the one. So he let the people have the first choice, and this is what they came with. So verse 3. So now the donkeys of Kish, Saul's father, was lost. So Kish said to his son Saul, take now with you one of the servants and arise and go search for the donkeys. So this is God's plan of how Saul is going to come into contact with Samuel. So the donkeys have strayed away, and so he is going out to look for them. So verse 4, he paused through the hill country of Ephraim and passed through the land of Shalisha, but they didn't find them. Then they passed through the land of Shalim, but they were not there. Then he passed through the land of the Benjamites, but they did not find them. So they were really on a journey, so they're really, traveling, going from town to town, trying to find out, or trying to locate the missing donkey. So when they came to the land of Zupra, Saul said to his servant who was with him, come and let us return, or else my father will cease to be concerned about the donkeys and will become anxious for us. So they had, probably been traveling for a while, maybe even a couple of days. And so Saul was saying, we looked, we can't find them. So at this point, my dad's not going to be worried about the donkeys anymore. He's going to be concerned about us, because we've been gone for a long time. And so, perfect example. Did Saul pray and ask God to lead him to the donkeys? So no, they just kind of went out on their own strength. But verse 6, this will be the last one. He said to him, behold, now there is a man of God in this city, and the man is held in honor, and all that he says surely comes true. Now let us go there. Perhaps he can tell us about our journey on which we have set out. So, so he did acknowledge that there was someone who can kind of help them out with their journey. So we will stop right there, and then we will, next week, we will pick up there on 7, and we'll see Saul's first